Hi there, this is my immediate reaction video for House of the Dragon Season 1 Episode 10, The Black Queen, the season finale. I'm going to cover this by going through the top 7 most notable points about the episode, good and bad, because 7 is a good number. Now you may have noticed, immediate reaction, I'm recording this on Thursday. I got a really bad fever when I was at work on Saturday, which came at me really fast. I mean, I was normal when I got in my car, and at lunch I was starting to feel weird. They said go home, and I have an hour and a half commute, like I've said, that mid-ride, I shot up to, by the time I got home, it was an 102-degree Fahrenheit fever, that I was not safe to drive, that when I started driving, I was good to drive. It was frightening, that middle of it, it was just, apparently there was a stomach virus going around in my region. They're talking about that, there's this triple surge of stuff. I don't know. I got tested. I didn't have COVID, and it wasn't a major flu strain. And the weird thing is I had no respiratory symptoms whatsoever, that I just had this intense fever. And I was bedridden for 3 days, so I'm sorry that if you thought I was going to rush out the big season finale overview, I was not. I was physically laid out. I'm not exaggerating. This was one of the worst fevers I've ever had. I mean, easily in the top 3 in my entire life going back to childhood. This was really frightening. I mean, I don't normally get, sometimes you get brain fog and racing thoughts when you have a fever. I've heard of that. And I got that a little once when I got the full flu in early 2019. Over a period of days. I felt normal when I woke up, and during a long commute, behind the wheel of a car, I suddenly was getting brain fog and racing thoughts, and just really laid me out. Managed to get home safely. Episode 10 leaked early, so I posted an advanced spoiler-free review of it, thankfully. I didn't leave you guys high and dry. That before it even aired, I managed to post this, basically just saying, everyone who is angry about the Rhaenys thing, they do address that, and it was a decent episode. Then I just collapsed in my bed for 3 days, so I have been out of it. I mean, I'm better now, but if you go back and listen to the spoiler-free thing, I recorded that like early Sunday, you see how my speech is slurred, that I'm talking very slowly, I'm searching for thoughts. I had a very high fever when I recorded that, and then I just passed out. So I'm sorry I made everyone wait for 3 days of, what now? During the work week. At least I'm getting this in time for next weekend, and I'm angry at how little work I've been able to get done other than just the week-to-week recaps. Thankfully, all the other major YouTube channels I've seen, usually they're just, busy with the weekly recaps and not getting that many analysis videos on Season 1 as a whole out either, but that's a whole other issue. So I just felt you deserved an explanation of where was I the past 3 days. This is one of the worst fevers I've ever had in my life, and I told myself I'm in no condition to make a good one, and I already had a spoiler-free review posted hours before it even aired, so if you needed a place to discuss it for my channel, I had a thing talking about it. But this is the 7-point breakdown, and what stood out to me as that, and again, as a book reader, it's not just overall quality. Like, I knew in advance that Luke would die one way or another. I know the major plot twists. I'm talking about how well did they execute it. That, like if I was reviewing Game of Thrones Season 1, I wouldn't be going, wow, this was a great episode. They killed Ned Stark, or the Red Wedding. I saw people going, you weren't praising the Red Wedding enough to some people, and it's because we knew it from a book. We were judging how well they executed it, and we're like complaining that they should have had Lyanna Mormont's sister, Daisy, in there. Kind of detracts that we don't have more Bannermen being killed. And they're like, oh, you're being negative. Well, no, that is kind of a story. Getting ahead of myself, but just what I've been doing, I'm just summarizing the season of reviews I've been doing here, is things that stood out as, oh, that was nice, or interesting, or good, bad. It's sometimes just things that stand out. And this is not the season overview. That I'm feeling really wobbly of how the heck do I do a season overview now that it's over, that I generally thought it was good, and what do I say? I'm not going to rush into that is coming. a season in review as a whole. I want to see what other channels have to say, particularly TV-only ones, but also the book ones like Westeros.org, of just where do we go from here, that this was considered a dead franchise, and this was generally a good season, and how did we feel about it? And not just good or bad, but realizing these characters and that it's a little different from the source material, because the source material is this unreliable narrator collection of in-universe biased histories that didn't know who the real Rhaenyra or Alicent were personality-wise. Very difficult to adapt that. Generally, I think they've handled that carefully as much as humanly possible, because this wasn't a full novel, that they had to develop something. But the season overview stuff, I don't know, but we will be talking about that for the next 2 months at least. Hopefully, that this is the aftermath period, and I'm terrified that everyone's going to leave. Please don't. So everyone came back to discuss this, only to, what are we going to do, leave again? That there's going to be this convention in December that has news coming out. The behind-the-scenes book and the full Blu-ray should be coming out in February. That'll lead right into filming news starting in March, April. So from February onwards, in terms of news, picking apart things, and analysis, we'll be hitting the ground running again February 1st onwards. And we will be getting some updates at the December convention. And it's the mix of, on the one hand, I feel like, should I be reviewing more things? Should I be cranking out more content? And on the other hand, or I have backlogged analysis videos. I need 2 months to catch up. But I told you guys that because I started a new job around mid-season, I had to stop what I was doing, and all I had time for were the episode recaps. And my original plan was to make like an analysis video every week to tie into that. And I have about 7 big ones I really want to cover. And I just made like 2 out of the dozen or so I wanted to make. Then again, a lot of channels weren't anticipating reporting on this at all. Everyone thought it would fail. So I don't know. So judging this season as a whole, I call them macro level, season scale things like the time skips, that isn't the fault of one episode, and fault is a big word, but that's a bigger issue. This episode in isolation as an episode of television, 7 things stood out to me. Point 1 is Rhaenys, who I already covered in the spoiler-free review. That, yes, right at the beginning, very clearly, Daemon goes, why didn't you just burn them? And she says, well, this isn't my war to fight. I already devoted a whole video to this, but I'll just say, this functions. And it went from being incoherent to, this is a little clunky and you needed a few more scenes clarifying it. The ways I would have improved it, and it's not bad, I would have improved it, just a line or 2 more, and maybe there was, and they cut it, of her saying, am I on your side? Because, you think about it, the Velaryons are being presented as this, for most of the season, as this third faction separate from the Blacks or the Greens. And I'm very interested in what a TV-only audience would think. I actually think a TV-only audience wouldn't feel as bad about it. Because literally a day before, due to time condensation, Rhaenys was on the fence about whether to support Rhaenyra's sons or not. And then she accepted a compromise of, well, we'll have a marriage alliance between them and my granddaughters. That's still not at the same level as actively supporting someone in a war. So just think that the fact Viserys came in and spoke in favor of Rhaenyra, and she thought it was such a big display of, she backed down at Vaemon's trial, that was before the dinner. This was within 24 hours. Like, she had changed her mind to the point that she was willing to, okay, I'll accept a compromise with Rhaenyra's sons. TV Rhaenys, they wanted to give her more to do. No one opposed that. And we knew from leaks over a year ago, we knew that season 1 would, near the end, that the leak said Rhaenys escapes on Meleys from the Dragon Pit to bring news to Dragonstone that Aegon has been crowned. That's a really good idea. The leaks never mentioned, it gives her more to do, never mentioned that she has a chance to kill them all and doesn't. So they should have emphasized a little more that they planned an arc, an actual character arc for Rhaenys of starting not sure if she likes Rhaenyra and gradually coming around to her, and then seeing Rhaenyra not eager for war is the final thing that puts her on her side in episode 10. That isn't a bad idea. It's just like many things in this season, you should have had more scenes setting it up. That it's a little staccato, it's not a smooth curve, but, the staccato, but generally it works, or at least I'm not raving about it anymore. I have no need to yell about this. And I don't even consider this a separate problem. I lump this in with, when I count in my hand the number of problems the season had, should have had 3 more episodes to have more scenes setting this up. Even the director of episode 8, I said in my episode 8 review before episode 9 even happened, this really needed to be 2 episodes, that she was complaining, and even though episode 8 was amazing, I'm introducing the younger version, the adult versions of all the younger cast members, and I'm having the goodbye dinner because they're never all going to be in the same room again. Everyone from both factions at the big dinner. This is basically 2 episodes. So if it was 2 episodes and they had more Rhaenys dialogue setting up how on the fence she is about Rhaenyra. Another thing is, sometimes, even though it's a little hitting people over the head, it clarifies, have someone having a mental flashback or a voiceover, And I think stylistically they don't like doing that, but, if they had Rhaenys staring down the coronation party there on her dragon, and then spliced in a 2-second clip of a line of dialogue from some other scene that didn't happen, of her going, am I on Rhaenyra's side? I'm on House Valarian's side. I don't know whose side I'm on. And then, in a close-up on her face, cut back to that and voiceover, or a quick cut, just to show this is what Rhaenys is thinking, this is why she didn't do this. They didn't emphasize it enough, but it works in-universe of well, and they gave an explanation. Am I on your side or not? Because that was her arc for the season, is coming around to being on Rhaenyra's side. And on top of that, Alicent, in good faith, offered me peace terms, surrender on generous terms, and said, I want to avoid bloodshed, and then there she is there. What am I going to do, kill them all? And they didn't emphasize that enough, or emphasize that kinslaying is bad. And if they had Alicent hugging her grandchildren, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera there, that would have made it a lot more clear. Or have a line where Alicent is yelling with Rhaenys, if we go to war, it'll end with one side killing the other and we'll all be kinslayers. Something like that to emphasize this. Generally, but it'd be interesting to see the reaction of a TV-only audience, reviewers, general mainstream reviewers on YouTube, who aren't paying attention to interviews. Because it kind of works if they should have aired these back-to-back. That is my conclusion. That they even say in the inside of the episodes, these are paired episodes. It's what the Greens are doing, then what the Blacks are doing, focusing on one half, then the other, not intercutting that much. We would not have seen the vitriol I've seen in the past week, and it's just, why did everyone fixate on Sarah Hess so much? I don't know. Not just that they were yelling about the Rhaenys thing, it's the part where they started looking for things to yell at her about. People saying, oh, she defends that Aegon is a rapist, when the showrunner and the actor were saying this weeks before she was, the same thing. That he's a bad person and does sexual assault, but we don't want to be a cartoon character. So as a psychological study, we want to see, well, what kind of messed up childhood someone would turn into being that, and to show that had he not been born in this circumstance with all these pressures, if Alicent wasn't his mom and if Viserys wasn't ignoring him, he could have turned out to be a different person. That he isn't a born psychopath or a bad seed or something. And that's just presenting a flawed character. And at no point did she defend him or call him sympathetic. And literally all she did was repeat what Condell said already. And people were then just laying into her about, like, oh, the time skip stuff. She is not responsible for, because she wrote episode 6, for things that, oh, they didn't punish Kristen Cole. That's a bigger problem than just episode 6. And other little things about, like, the Daemon characterization. That was actually, if you've been paying as much attention as I have to scenes they deleted of Daemon throughout the season, they weren't just cutting Daemon scenes from her episodes. They were constantly tweaking, is this him being too nice? And that's a separate issue, I'll get to that, but that wasn't a one-writer thing, and I don't know why people needed to... The Rhaenys thing was really annoying. I think the problem is that they screwed up at the inside of the episode by whatever editing they do, that instead of in the inside the episode, if mentally picture, if in the inside the episode Condal had just said, well, a day ago she didn't even know if she was going to support Rhaenyra's sons, she isn't on the Blacks or the Greens yet, why does she want to get tied into a war for Rhaenyra? All would have been well. Instead, they launched into this thing about, but Alicent is a mother, and therefore she won't kill her, made it sound like this split-second decision rather than a calculated political, wait a minute, why am I bringing the Velaryons into a war that we have no stake in? So that was just weird comments in the inside the episode, and that's like the second or third tier thing you get to when you're listing off, like what I just did of, I don't want to get dragged into a war, Alicent isn't a monster, I'm also a mother, why I'm watching her with her family, what am I going to do, kill her, it'll be kinslaying, I'm not going to kinslay for Rhaenyra when I'm not even sure if I'm on her side. That would have been coherent to me. And they just edited it poorly. And if you're going to blame Sarah Hess, blame Ryan Condal for what he said in the inside of the episode. I think it was just a perfect storm of a couple of minor slips, or not problems. I like these writers. Just everything aligned to make it seem like they didn't know what they were doing when they actually did. That they just weird quotes taken out of context. And again, the Hollywood Reporter interviewer gives bad interviews. When he gave an interview with Sarah Hess about that he edited it poorly or something to make her sound flippant, and Ryan Condal said, yeah, she kind of has a glib, she's joking. And if it was on video, you could tell she was being lighthearted about something, but the text interview didn't reflect that, and I think it's a fault of the interviewer, not her. This is the second time that we've had gaffes from the Hollywood Reporter guy poorly displaying what someone is saying. The first time was when Sapochnik himself said, look, we're not going to shy away from showing sexual assault in the show. And Sarah Hess had to come out in Vanity Fair and go to do damage control for that bad interview, which was like presenting it out of context or tone deaf, as the Hollywood Reporter guy is, to go in Vanity Fair, look, it exists in this world, but we're not going to present it gratuitously. We're going to show just the victim being upset after it happened. That she had to clarify this. This is the second bad interview that Hollywood Reporter has given. First one made Sapochnik look bad. So I don't know why they went through that, but the phrasing was just odd and fixating too much on the mother stuff and not, why would I get dragged into a war? I mean, the thing that the actress said, Eve Best, the day after the episode aired, was the reason. Asked in interviews, she said, because Rhaenys doesn't know if it's her war. This isn't her war. She's a third side in all of this. Because she was there when they filmed this, when Rhaenys gives that explanation in episode 10, that is the official stated reason. And on top of that, look, I'm not going to kinslay. I see that she's not Cersei. She's not this monster I'm going to kill for kinslaying's purpose. So my hope is that this fades with time and everyone just got worked up because these should have been aired back to back or should have had more scenes to set them up. And I don't even consider this a different... It was good to give her an arc. Good to give Rhaenys an arc. He just needed more episodes to do it in. And I don't blame them for that. So with that out of the way at the beginning of the episode, that they address it head on directly. So many people were convinced they wouldn't, because that's what Benioff and Weiss would do. Things fall into place, and then they don't ask obvious questions. Whereas here they just have Daemon immediately go, well, why didn't you kill them all? Am I on your side, Daemon? I don't know. Fine. Then the rest of the episode got under the way. I think that was just a result of bad time. It was a confluence of many small factors presented it as more annoying than it was. And yet, at the time, in my episode 9 review, I said, let's see how episode 10 handles this. And it was decent enough. It was just accident. These happen. Crud, I'm already 20 minutes into this, but we're not going to be doing another one of these for at least 12 months, so I might as well round out everything else. Because that was the big issue everyone was yelling about. I hope discussion about the Rhaenys stuff dies off a month from now or something, that we'll just remember, oh yeah, that little thing we thought was dumb. It's not that I thought, in retrospect, it works for Rhaenys. Now, if you watch them back to back, that you know where this is going, fine. 0.2 out of 7. Things that stood out to me. Kingsguard stuff. Like, this started as Harold Westerling. It's turned into just the Kingsguard in general. I thought Harold Westerling was going to defect to Rhaenyra this episode, and now I'm not sure what they're doing with him. In the books, Harold dies of old age during the time jump, or same year that Grand Maester Mellos dies. So now the question is, well, what is Harold doing? And we thought they were just merging him with another Kingsguard. Is he doing something else? I hope not. I hope it's just him. He'll probably join Rhaenyra. That seems to be what they're setting up. To give you a summary, because I have been covering the casting news for the different Kingsguard in the months leading up to Season 1. Because Game of Thrones, other than, Barristan and Jaime, they just had Meryn Trant as this condensation character for basically the other 5 Kingsguard. And they'd mention my name, Preston Greenfield or something, but he wasn't a cast person with dialogue. There was never a credited actor. In contrast, because the Kingsguard splits in half in the Civil War, we have basically 6 Kingsguard characters out of 7. Well, here's what happened in the books. The Kingsguard at the time of Viserys' death split in half. Now, Harold was already dead, so Criston Cole was already Lord Commander. The Kingsguard who stayed with Aegon and Criston were Eric, twin of Eric. Eric went with Criston, as did 2 other guys who do roles in the story. Rickard Thorne and Willis Fell. The ones that defected to Rhaenyra were Steffan Darklyn, Laurent Marbrand, and Eric Cargill. Eric, the other twin. Now, Eric and Laurent, I think, were already at Dragonstone in the book version. That there's 2 already on Dragonstone, and a 3rd one steals Viserys' crown, the crown of Jaehaerys, and sneaks out of King's Landing to give it to her. So they switched them around. In the book, it was Steffan who did that, and Eric who was on Dragonstone. In the TV show, Steffan was already on Dragonstone, and it was Eric who steals the crown. I thought that Harold Westerling was going to come with Eric to do that. Now where is he? Well, what happened after that? Okay, so there's 4 of the originals went with the Greens, and 3 went to the Blacks. If there's only 7 at a given time, and Harold is still alive, and they named Laurent, Steffan, Eric, Criston, and so forth, they named 6 out of 7 guys, you see. The 2 they never mentioned on screen were Rickard Thorne and Willis Fell, because they can't both be in the Kingsguard at the same time, and Harold is still there. That would add up to 8. So there is a guy credited as 7th Kingsguard in IMDb. I don't think they've decided who he's playing yet. And are they going to condense Rickard and Willis? It's not, I've talked about this before, it's not really that big of a thing. In the books, they never actually give... In the books, after they split in half, Rhaenyra and Aegon promote up other knights as replacement Kingsguard. In Rhaenyra's case, Queensguard. That, Rhaenyra has 3 guys. She promotes up another 4 to round out her Queensguard. Aegon has 4. He promotes up another 3. So we never had a full listing of those other replacement Kingsguard. So I think the only difference is that whereas in the books, Rickard and Willis were already Kingsguard, I think they're going to make Rickard promoted to replace the loss of Harold. One of the new 3 that they promote. Willis fell. It's kind of a plot point. They mentioned that he's been in the Kingsguard since the time of Viserys, is a point that comes up later, that he's this veteran Kingsguard. So I think what they're going to do is have Rickard Thorne be a new guy. That's not a problem whatsoever, because we didn't have a definitive listing of all the Kingsguard. Where is Harold? Spoilers. One of Rhaenyra's Kingsguard dies trying to wrangle a dragon very early on. So I think they're just going to have Harold show up to replace him. In which case, how would you organically go, and here's yet another defector, and make it feel like a big moment? I'm not really sure what they're doing with Harold, so keep an eye on that. I'm not worried. There might just not have been time for it. And this is probably me being worried about nothing of, well, why didn't Harold defect by the end of season 1? They're probably going, they'll probably introduce that as soon as the other guy gets burned. So that's thoughts on the Kingsguard of just, well, what are they doing with him in that? So that's just reshuffling all the character names. They introduced a lot of Kingsguard in this. There's 2 named Kingsguard with speaking lines. Stefan and Laurent are introduced this episode. There's Eric and Eric. That's 4, plus Kristen Harold is 6. This is a lot of guys. So that's reshuffling the Kingsguard there. Point 3, and in the middle of this list I put the small things like Kingsguard and Heraldry, just because I don't want to end or begin on it. Point 3, and this is a minor point, they changed the Heraldry. That when they go, when then the Kingsguard goes to her, we've spotted Otto's ship coming to Dragonstone, flying a 3-headed green dragon. Is that going to be the Green's war banner in the TV show? Because it isn't that in the books. That in the books, each side in the war takes the personal sigil of Rhaenyra or Aegon as their battle flag to differentiate them. And that Rise of the Dragon book just came out with a lot of new official artwork. It's making the round. The artwork's been circulating around on Twitter, so you've probably seen this. There was one piece of artwork. This is the first time they've actually depicted in official artwork this one image of both war banners. That Rhaenyra's banner is the Targaryen heraldry quartered with the Arryn heraldry for her mother, and the Velaryon heraldry for her first husband, and the Velaryons are her major supporters, and she intermarried with them. So it's normal Targaryen heraldry quartered with Arryn and Velaryon. Aegon the Two's heraldry is the normal Targaryen heraldry, just one big 3-headed dragon, but instead of being red, it's gold, because he takes great pride in his golden dragon Sunfire, that it literally looks like it's made of gold, not just yellow, but like shining and metallic. We barely saw Sunfire this season. We saw him once out of focus intentionally because there wasn't enough budget for this, and his big reveal won't come until later. So come to think of it, this entire season never introduced that Rhaenyra and Aegon have different sigils, but it only really comes up when the war starts, so fine, make a big deal out of it in the beginning of season 2. But that leads to the question, are they going to change Aegon's heraldry from a gold dragon to a green dragon? Just as they changed the Velaryons from a real seahorse to a heraldic seahorse, which affects Rhaenyra's sigil. I don't know, but I've talked about this before. One thing that interests me is our perception of history is retrospective. But when you actually go and look at the American War of Independence or the American Civil War, early on, it's, early installment weirdness is what TV Tropes calls it. There were a couple of alternate flags they went through at first before they settled on the more familiar version, like American Revolution. Before they settled on the Stars and Stripes, the Gadsden flag, that thing with the snake, was one of their symbols. The Civil War, a lot of the early Confederate flags, or even Union war flags, they went through different redesigns before they settled on the more familiar, famous version that we remember from the end of the war. So what we consider, iconic. So just as, there were early different logos when they were experimenting around with it. My question is, the thing here is, the books, it mentions the first battle of the war, the Battle of the Burning Mill in the Riverlands. They said both sides used a regular Targaryen. There's this footnote saying both sides used the regular Targaryen banner. Only afterwards did everyone realize how confusing that was, because it's a civil war between sides, both saying, well, we're real Targaryens, we're just two branches of it. Then they started using the Rhaenyra flag and the Aegon flag to differentiate themselves so they don't, end up attacking their own units. So they might play around with that, because they didn't emphasize Sunfire enough, that with Sunfire the Golden. And I'm not sure how I feel about that, because the Green Dragon, it's not like it comes out of nowhere, but a Green Dragon is a tavern name, not, this imposing battle flag, and it's for Sunfire, and I'm not sure. I'd be more upset if they didn't. No, they are going to introduce different heraldry if it's a green one. Logically, they need to introduce Rhaenyra's quartered heraldry next season. They're not going to change that too, are they? I can't. What? They're not going to put a black dragon on red. That's the Blackfire heraldry, to be, well, we're the blacks and the greens. They know what. No, Condell knows what the Blackfire heraldry is. He originally started this by pitching a Duncan Egg prequel back in the day. Then again, you saw that. I hate it when they do that, when they have, like, at the tournament and stuff, the drummers wear reversed colors where there's black dragons on red. Granted, this is 100 years before the Blackfire Rebellion. It doesn't have that associated meaning with it. But that's my worst case scenario, is that they put a black dragon on a red field for her. No, the black dragon means the Blackfires. That's silly. And you need to quarter it for the Arryns and the Velaryons and everything. But that's me worrying about heraldry from one stray mention, and maybe they'll fix that by next season anyway. This is something I would pester them about in interviews, because it's something they could give a real answer for. Look, are you changing the heraldry again? Point 4 out of 7. Aemond kills Luke accidentally in this version. Thinking on it, I don't really have a problem with this because of the unreliable narrator thing. They're playing around with the unreliable narrator thing. Actually, it's, if you pay attention, I wanted to do this video series on unreliable narrator moments in Season 1, and this actually did come up. I'm going to get to that. That most sources say they fought and Luke died. Mushroom's fantastical account says that when his body washed up on the shore, Aemond horrifically mutilated it in a rage. That he cut out his eyes and presented them to the Baratheons on a plate of seaweed. So you see, even in the source material, there is a debate between, did he just kill him as a warrior and a gentleman, or was he a monster who flew into a fury and mutilated his corpse? It's sort of like they did their own unreliable narrator thing in the opposite direction. I'm picturing this like a graph line, that there's the straight neutral line, then there's veering off towards evil, which is what Mushroom said. It's sort of like the equal and opposite of the Mushroom thing, which is he was just fighting him and screwing with him and didn't really think through the dragons will get excited and kill each other. Which, okay, that's like a mirror of the Mushroom thing. They're playing around with it because there were no witnesses. That no one could see from that distance. It was the middle of a storm. And that's a frightening thing when you think about just on, like, I've played football in high school. I've gotten into fights. Who hasn't? What if you get into a fight and accidentally kill someone because you just weren't thinking about what you were doing? You see that in TV and film a lot when people, when someone gets into a fist fight or they knock someone over. I'm thinking like Ender's Game, where he ends up killing a bully in the showers, even though he was defending himself. That he just kicked him back and he just hit his head at such a good angle that he managed to accidentally kill someone in a fight. That is really, fighting enemies on the battlefield who you intend to kill, that's one thing, but just the horror of accidentally killing someone, because I was angry in a fist fight, and I wasn't thinking through how bad it was going to get. It just escalated. It mirrors the fight where he lost his eye, that they weren't planning to kill each other or to slice out his eye. It's just, it incrementally escalated from, he was punching, he was shoving, we gang tackled him, he fought us off, he was starting to club my brother with club my brother with a rock, so I slashed out his eye to defend him. That it escalated, and no side really knew what they were doing. They're playing around with the characterization, but okay, that on a broader level, we've seen them doing this with Rhaenyra and Alicent. That it's not a mistake. It's not Benioff and Weiss going, let's show off the actors for inconsistency. They've consistently said, our view is that the in-universe historian who wrote Fire and Blood, all of them, Monk and Eustace, our view is that they were biased sources that didn't know the real people, and that history remembers everyone in a bad light, that they didn't know the real Rhaenyra, they didn't know the real Alicent, that neither one was hungry for war. That they're kind of doing that with Aemond as well. He has emotions and he's a person, and that you think he's a psycho at first in episode 8 because he's consumed by revenge, but then you see, well, I'm not this sexually depraved guy like Aegon. I care about Helena. They should have put more dialogue in that thing where you half hear at the beginning of the dinner him chewing out Aegon for, you need to stop being drunk and fooling around with the handmaids. You're shaming our family and Helena. That he cares about things, that he's not just this psycho. That they're playing around with it. The histories remember Aemond wrong, and if I said it still feels like green propaganda, but they're rounding off Rhaenyra and other things too, as long as they do it equally to both sides with that. And I like what Congal said in interviews, that basically Aemond now has a choice. Look like a screw-up by admitting it was an accident, and no one will care it was an accident, or I might as well own it and act like I did it on purpose and have my enemies fear me. Just as Rhaenyra wanted people to fear maybe she really killed Laenor. That building up his own myth of how crazy, they're playing with the unreliable narrative. This is such a weird thing to review compared to A Song of Ice and Fire in adaptation, because it's an adaptation of an outline of an unreliable source. What was meant to be an unreliable source. So characterization-wise, I don't have it's an interesting twist, but I don't have a problem with it. And I wonder how TV-only viewers would think of that. He's angry about his eye, but he's not really going to kill anyone. We didn't really see much of the Baratheon. Boros Baratheon was nice. They made him intentionally a lot like Robert, I guess. We didn't see his wife at all. We did see the 4 Storms, all of them, but they didn't have speaking lines. His 4 daughters aren't really characters in this, but they will be in the aftermath of the Civil War. That they're setting up characters for the next prequel who are, working backwards. If in the next prequel era there's this 50-year-old political leader, you need to show them as a teenager during the dance to show where they came from. But, in the books it says they never knew who he picked. That he said, did he pick the eldest daughter with the best dowry, Cassandra, or did he pick Maris the clever one or Floris the pretty one? The website updated that he picked Floris. She's the one standing next to him, who is the pretty one. So all of that. So I thought the whole sequence was very well directed, particularly when they explain, for filming in darkness, it's strobe light because it's lightning, and they explain, well, it's better lit because light reflects off of water. Yatannis knows how to film at night. Which I shouldn't have to be saying that sometimes they don't, but when they were talking about how they just storyboarded out the whole fight, this was a really good fight. It's got moments from Jurassic Park in it. He said a longer interview I'm going to go over where he says Jurassic Park really, on the original, managed to really show the scale of an animal that big following you. That when you see the T-Rex following you, you just see its leg, that you can't see the whole animal. That when you see Vagar suddenly lit up by lightning, that it's just 6 times the size of the other one, and it's out of frame. That's another thing that Sapochnik actually did when he was showing the dragons in the first show, which they do to great effect here as well, that lions don't sit still waiting for the camera to focus on them fully in the frame. That when you're nature shooting in the bush, filming a lion, real documentary footage, the lion's paws are always slightly out of frame or something because it's not sitting still for you. So even though the dragon is a full CGI construct, that they made it a point to show it's not always neatly in the frame because that makes it look more real. But in this case, a lot more big. It's so big. It's like the Star Destroyer at the beginning of A New Hope, that it's out of frame. It's so big. So seeing the behind-the-scenes videos of they got toy dragons and just worked it out with iPhones for a couple of weeks of, all right, Luke's going to look behind him, and this is going to happen. The prep that goes into planning out a fight scene like that. I'm tired of people saying, but the dragon fight between the Night King and Jon and Daenerys was so great. It wasn't. It was good CGI, poorly lit, and then kind of cool when they go over the cloud cover, but I am happy that this will put to memory, that people will forget, because it was the only example of a dragon versus dragon fight they had, that this was a better filmed fight. This is how you film things, not in the darkness and the other stuff. It's funny, even in the inside the episode, Ryan Condal calls it the first dragon versus dragon fight in this franchise. Not of the war, but in the franchise. I guess they're going with, well, technically the Night King and an undead Viserion wasn't a real dragon anymore that would behave like a dragon. Yeah, but taking digs where they can, that this was a very well-filmed thing. I think they set it up reasonably well, that he's just a hothead and he wasn't thinking through what would happen, and then I might as well own this. So, fair enough. This is like the opposite of what Mushroom did. They're playing with it. Point 5. Daemon. I'm actually going to leave this short because this is kind of one of those macro scale issues, which I wouldn't even call a problem, that they have Daemon being really angry the whole episode. That how do you write a character who is explicitly described as neither a hero nor a villain, who's this Byronic figure in the classic sense, mad, bad, dangerous to know, that he's volatile, and you don't want to lead too far into he's a villain or too far into that he's good. Season scale issue, like they took out scenes of him hugging his daughters after Laena died, because we don't want to show him as too soft. If we play up that he's too nice, he's on the fence of morality, and I defend them. It is really hard to write a character like that, and from all that, we'll be going over this in the postseason, they deleted a lot of Daemon scenes. Not flippantly, and Ryan Collins repeatedly said, this is the character that's in my head the most, that they struggled a lot and kept rewriting and refining and debating how much, adjusting the dials. How much do we show Daemon as positive and negative qualities? That do we have him the episode after he murders, even accidentally murdered, well, manslaughter, not premeditated is what they were saying, Rhea Royce. He's then hugging his daughter after his other wife dies. That he's all over the place with that, so they would smooth out certain things or add in other things, like the point where he picks up his brother's crown. That was a good thing. That was entirely improvised, and they worked that out and thought it was a better idea. So it's not just that, yes, the point where he flips out and chokes Rhaenyra one-handed because he's so angry. Now, this episode leaked early, so before I got to see it, I heard people saying he chokes her out. I'm not trying to make a distinction here, but I thought they said that he was choking her two-handed and nearly killed her, is the way someone said it on Twitter, which was not true. Or, and the way she doesn't react makes it seem like this is a common thing. They didn't say that. The thing is, he is not a good person. He's not a bad person. He's this mercurial, in-the-middle character, like I think like a rock star or something. Where, the behind-the-scenes documentary shows how violent they were, but they were also good in some ways. I get what they were trying to do, because again, the leaks from over a year ago didn't mention this specifically, but the leak said Daemon freaks out when she tells him that about the prophecy, because she assumed Viserys told him when he was the heir apparent as the male heir, and he never did. He never officially named him his heir, never told him the prophecy. I refer to what In Deep Geek's video on this did. That he summarizes better than I can of just the summary of he's mad, bad, dangerous to know, and on top of that, this is this stunning betrayal that Viserys never thought he could be king, never thought he could be heir. So this isn't even like a normal moment for Daemon. This is he's grief-stricken, and now she tells him this horrible betrayed news, and like, is Alicent committing child abuse for grabbing her son's face to yell into his face something? It reminded me of that scene. So I'm not trying to downplay that, but people going, oh, with all the baggage, oh, domestic abuse, this must be going on a lot. No, they're not implying this is this has happened before with them. This is just him having a really volatile moment. And Daemon is going to do some dark stuff as the series progresses. This isn't something shippers should like as this epic romance. Well, in one of those romances between volatile characters, I'm not comparing it to Lion and Winter, where it is a romance, but Henry and Eleanor are constantly fighting. It's that kind of romance, not the childhood idealized Prince Charming thing. What my point is, I get what you're trying to do, that they kept trying to refine the season for. Daemon is dark, they try to put in moments of sympathy. When he's good, they try to remind you that he's bad. I think there were better ways to do this than him grabbing her one-handed by the throat to yell in her face. I wouldn't have done that. At the same time, I don't think it ruins the character. Just, I would have shown that some other way. Because of all the baggage that people bring in with that. So I wouldn't have gone and done it that way, but I get what they were trying to do. Just, it's a matter of refinement. And again, that's one of the things we'll be discussing on the season scale of how do you write a character like Daemon, who he's not good, bad. I mean, like Book Tyrion is borderline sometimes. Jaime even more so. So I'm not really sure how you would address that, but doesn't ruin the show for me, and not just the Rhaenyra thing. Daemon's actually the one arguing for war the whole time. In the books, he's also really smart, so he doesn't argue for war. That line where he goes, dragons can kill dragons, therefore we should gang up on and kill Vhagar. In the books, it's the opposite. He said he's warning them, dragons can kill dragons, so let's not act like we're invincible. We have more dragons, but if we send them out against Vhagar, they'll pick us off. That Sunfire and Vhagar and Tessarion, that even if we have... This will probably come up a lot more in early season 2, where they explain, why don't we just go straight for King's Landing? Well, it's like in chess, if you send your queen against the enemy queen, you're also exposing them to attack. That it's like a mutually assured destruction thing, that most of the war, the dragons are at King's Landing and Dragonstone to deter an attack from the other side. And both sides know this, that we can sometimes move a dragon somewhere else to out in the provinces, but it's mostly us glaring across Blackwater Bay at each other trying to outmaneuver, that they realize we need to gang up on Vhagar 6-on-1. And Aemond knows, do not let them gang up on me, try to pick them off one at a time, because Vhagar can do that. I can't just wade into all of them, I could die. That Daemon is the one saying we shouldn't try to match them strength for strength. We should try to build up our field armies. Problem is, the people arguing for that are like Bartimos Celtigar in the books, minor characters, and then Daemon has to point this out. They want to put these actions in the words of main characters, so their idea is that Rhaenyra is arguing for peace and Daemon is the one who wants war. They vaguely said this in interviews, that Daemon is the one that most of the drama scenes next season will be fueled by Rhaenyra wanting, she's not as restrained anymore now that Luke's dead, but her arguing with Daemon over we shouldn't go too far and just wipe things out. We shouldn't be reckless. And it kind of fits that Daemon would be the reckless one, even though the book say, it's complicated. He's reckless, but also really intelligent, that he is both the guy in the books with the long-term plan and the one who will occasionally do things on impulse. Very convoluted character. So it weirded me out that Daemon, who is the smart one showing restraint in the book, they made him the Warhawk more. For the purposes of drama and shifting dialogue between characters, we know that kind of works. But we'll see how that plays out in season 2. It was fine for now, but I don't want them to portray him as an idiot. Because he also lays out a pretty good war plan of, we'll assemble everyone at Harrenhal, we'll block them off from land, that you need to show he is a capable war leader and not just a blood knight who doesn't think through his actions. He's very intelligent. He is a cunning strategist. Like when they're listing off their advantages in the book, one of the things they list isn't even their dragons. They say Daemon is one of the few men who's had really good war experience. He is a good strategist. Aegon isn't. And that is one of our key, having a good general and strategist is one of our major advantages. So that's not a good or bad view on Daemon. Just Daemon is my fifth point in all of this of they're playing around with how smart do we make him versus how much of a hothead do we make him, how good, bad, we have to refine. This is a macro scale thing, and I wouldn't say they did a bad job. It's hard to do. And I think Matt Smith generally manages to sell it. I don't think, this isn't like when Benioff and Weiss are getting a character wrong. This is a really challenging character to write. Now, how do you find that balance? But just thoughts on that, and we'll see how they go in season 2, if they just have drama for the sake of drama, or if it's, you need to have both sides be kind of half right to have drama, not just be Daemon be the contrarian to build up how great Rhaenyra is for going, no, we should show restraint. You need to have points where Rhaenyra shows too much restraint, and Daemon's plan would have worked if she hadn't stopped him on like a specific battlefield or something. That to show that both sides have a valid argument, that is the core of drama, when two sides have legitimate points, not when you're making one into a Mary Sue. Now, these are all baseless fears at this point. What am I criticizing for something I haven't done yet? But we need to keep an eye on just the characterization there. Generally, I was okay with it, that this works for the TV universe. Wrapping all this together, point 6 and 7 are things looking ahead to the future. Point 6 is the inventory of dragons that Daemon gives at the War Council, listing off all of them, including ones we haven't seen before on screen. And he says the Greens have 4, and broadly speaking, we have 13, including the 6 riderless ones. Actually brings up 2 points. First of which is saying, he actually says the Greens have 3 adult dragons, and then 2 lines later says, they have 4 to our 13. This is the first time they're acknowledging that Daeron the Daring exists, Alicent's 4th son, who has the dragon Tessarion. And Tessarion, she's a young adult. Think in human terms she's like 18 to 21-ish. She's roughly the same size as Sea Smoke, they said. And, well, the other ones are huge. She's younger, but he's in Old Town now. And the Reach front of the war, Tessarion is the only dragon there. So one young dragon is a whole matter when you don't have a dragon to respond to it with. So that's that whole thing of we were worried, did they cut Daeron? And then Martin said in a blog post, no, Daeron's in it. He's just in Old Town. He's squiring for his Hightower cousins like he was in the books. He wasn't in King's Landing for these events, but he'll show up in season 2. Nice thing was in the post-episode podcast interview, the official podcast post-episode thing they put out, Ryan Condal came back for that with a Conception on his podcast, and Ryan Condal confirmed. He said, yeah, George has already said this. Yes, I can say Daeron will be in season 2. He exists in the TV show. He's in Old Town right now. Still, it was nice to have just even this indirect acknowledgement that they have 4 dragons. I'm curious what TV-only people would think about that. I'm looking through blind reaction videos. Will anyone catch up? I'm interested, does anyone catch, wait, who's the 4th dragon? I don't know. The other thing is, the second point I said this brings up is, this must be the specific scene where they got the count of 17 dragons from. Because that was a whole thing throughout the build-up to Season 1, where they kept going, oh, there's like 17 dragons in it, when book readers could tell you, well, wait, there's 20 living dragons at the start of the Civil War in the books. And, the clickbait sites just focused on 17. We're like, but where are the other 3? That got resolved by, there was an interview right before Season 1, the one about dragon breeds. where they did say there will be 3 wild dragons. And we said, well, that's it. The 3 they skipped are the hatchlings that are too small to ride. That Grey Ghost, who's one of the wild dragons, I could see them cutting. But because the missing number is 3 and there's 3 hatchlings, it matches up. Okay, they must not be counting the hatchlings. The lingering question was, are they not counting them because they're hatchlings, or is it in the TV show they don't exist yet? This episode confirms they don't exist yet in the TV show, that when Daemon is listing off their war assets, even including riderless dragons and wild ones that have never known riders, he then skips to, and I have a score of eggs incubating in the dragon mount. If they had hatchlings, he would have listed that if he's also listing eggs. And the other half of that is, they had a line prominently establishing, I'm incubating eggs, some of them may hatch soon. Right? So that's what we got here, that I think they want to show the dragon life cycle, that we'll see dragons hatching, the 3 hatchlings, next season. That Rhaenyra's 4th son, Aegon the Younger, older brother of Viserys, he gets a dragon, Stormcloud, who's just a hatchling. And the other 2 in the books were the dragons Morgul and Shrykos that went to Aegon and Helena's twins, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, the little children we saw in episode 8. Now, obviously, the Greens don't have the hatcheries on Dragonstone, but they have their dragons, that they could easily say, Sunfire sired some eggs on Dreamfire, and we gave the eggs to our twins at the beginning of season 2. I mean, they mentioned that there's dragon eggs in the dragon pit of King's Landing, when the dragons that live there, like Dreamfire, lay eggs. They don't ship them to the dragon pit. They don't ship them from the dragon pit to Dragonstone right away. So, okay, she laid a new clutch, we gave them to our kids, fine, you can work that around. But that so prominently that he's going to try to hatch more eggs, and they get Stormcloud from that. This brings up a separate issue of Daemon's daughters. Rhaena, they brought up that she doesn't have that her egg hasn't hatched yet, the cradle egg. When she was introduced in episode 6, they never quite mentioned that again. That in the book, that egg hatches, but it's sickly and dies in less than a day. Kind of, they give her a new egg after that. That Syrax lays another clutch, so they give her a new egg, and it eventually hatches into a dragon she names Morning. But it's kind of like, I wonder if they're going to use it to mirror how Rhaenyra just had a stillbirth. That if they actually have Rhaena have this horrific, the dragon is sickly and dies in early season 2, to mirror that loss. I don't know. But they might play around with it. I think they should give her more to do. So, something along those lines with Rhaena. That the line that we have, I have like a score that's 20 eggs incubating. Can't just be Stormcloud. They might try stuff with Rhaena. They might even introduce Morning early, for all I know. They might be playing around with it. They are already playing around with it. The hatchlings aren't born yet. The other thing was with Baela, the older daughter. This was the first scene where they mentioned the name of her dragon, Moondancer. They did say since episode 6 she has a dragon, but it's young and it's growing. I wonder if they'll age up Moondancer in the show to give Baela a little more to do. That they say that it's just young enough. It's really young. It's not really big enough to ride. It's on the verge. It's the point where Baela, who is a younger girl and doesn't weigh that much, can ride her around the castle courtyard, and she's training to ride her more at the beginning of the war. 2 years late, it takes 2 years for her to get to the point where she's like Arax Virmax sized. And then when she becomes militarily useful. I wonder if they'll age her up a bit just for the sake of the show, visually, but say, oh, she's still way too young to risk at war. Let's leave her on Dragonstone as a deterrent against sea attack, along with the half a dozen other ones like Syrax who are here as a deterrent. Maybe they'll do something like that. I think they should, just to, rather than go, oh, here's Moondancer, but Baela, she isn't big enough to ride, Give her a few scenes with invented Bela scenes of her riding Moondancer around the castle and going, I wish she was big enough to take to war, but I can at least ride her around the castle. That'll be nice in terms of introducing more dragon designs. But that's where things stand setting up the other dragons. Point 7, the last thing here is, it just says in my notes, setting up Season 2. When they're mentioning... It's actually 8 minutes long, the War Council scene, but they split it into 2 scenes. But altogether, when they're talking around the table, it is 8 minutes of stuff. It's not even up to me. I thought they did a good job of presenting it, but I wonder if casual viewers will pick up on all of this. But that's how I would have told them to do it. Do it by looking at a map and pointing at the thing you're talking about for exposition. Then on Game of Thrones, there are points where like Benioff and Weiss would be like, oh, it would take too long to explain the strategic stuff of where Dorne is or other stuff. Or point at a map while you're talking about it. They actually did that in Season 1 where they're staying closer to the books, where like something simple when Robb Stark is talking about in his war camp, we're going to send a force to feint east to Tywin, but the core of my army will go west in a surprise attack to ambush Jaime's army and annihilate it. And it's simplistic, it's really slow and to bash it over the viewer's head because they're not familiar with the geography. Here is a map. Here I am pointing. Here is where the twins are. This is where Riverrun is. It's in a simplified map, but it gets the point across. This reminded me of that back when they knew how to use a goddamn map. So that's why the map markers are cool. That's why they sell those as toys. That's why I buy those toys and decorations of the map markers. We love those things. Remember when they just stopped using those? Or like that Season 8 War Council thing when they actually have the map markers, and even visually it makes no sense. Why is your army outside the castle when there's visibly a horde of things? And that was a terrible scene because it shows how absurd their plan is. Versus War Council scenes where the map markers actually make a good deal of sense. So they made this great new prop for the painted table, the map table, that it's obsidian and you put candles in it to light it up. Some were worried that Dorne wasn't on it. If you look, Dorne is on the map. They just don't put candles under that part because they don't control Dorne. But it's not removed. It's there. It's just they didn't light up that part. But generally the dialogue is straight from the book, with her going, okay, Jace, you're going to go to Jane Arryn in the Vale, who is my mother's cousin, because my mother was an Arryn. And they mentioned Jane before in episode 4 briefly. Then you're going to go to Winterfell, where Cregan Stark is there. You saw his father Rickon in the first episode. And he has a whole storyline in Winterfell where they say... It's an unreliable narrator thing in the book where they go, there's this rumor that he fell in love with Cregan's bastard half-sister Sarah Snow, is this mysterious, close with the old gods type of girl, but the other historians go, she never existed, and the other historians go, well, she could have existed because the chroniclers don't really record bastards, so she might have existed and they just didn't talk about it. But there's this whole mystery there it gets pretty involved of saying he gave her a dragon egg and all this other stuff. So setting up Jace's adventures in Season 2, and I hope they don't resolve all of that in the first episode. Or because what if I'm worried they'll burn through the Jane Arryn stuff to get to the Cregan stuff because we need Starks. But if they devote a good 30 minutes to it, I wouldn't have a problem. Like if Jane is in for 2 minutes and then Cregan is in 15 minutes after that within the first episode, I'd be annoyed. But if they have a good 10 minutes of screen time for Jace and Jane Arryn in the first episode, and then at the end of the episode, he arrives at Winterfell and guy goes, hey, I'm Cregan Stark, set it as a hook for episode 2, I'd be fine with that. Give her like 10 minutes, that's a decent amount of time. He does even more with Cregan. I'd actually prefer that because it keeps the viewers hungry for the second episode. You don't want to spoil everything at once and then burn through your content. I'm debating how to structure Season 2. I'm sorry. It's just, I don't want them to burn through all of that. I want to give both locations the time they deserve. And other things they were setting up were the Riverlands, actually. That Daemon says he's going to go to the Riverlands. And just, well, Lord Grover Tully, he's fickle and easily swayed. You are mentally picturing the Sesame Street parody of Game of Thrones where Grover was dressed in medieval clothes. So the thing is that the opening phase of the war is civil war in the Riverlands. That remember the Blackwoods and Brackens who were feuding in episode 4. The Blackwood boy, after the time jump, his children are major POV characters, and of course, because one side joins Rhaenyra, because the Blackwood Bracken feud, if one of them joins Rhaenyra, the other one has to join Aegon and Alicent. So there's civil war in the Reach, and Daemon is attacking Harrenhal with Caraxes. That's going to be a thing. Major location in the war, changes hands a couple of times, and just the opening military phases of the war there, the Daeron stuff they already set up with the Reach. I kind of wanted them to set up Jason Lannister's wife, Joanna Westerling, in the show. That never came up, because she's a major character. There's still time for she is a Lannister by marriage. I kind of thought they'd set up that Harold is her uncle or something, Harold Westerling, but whatever. So they're setting up the course of the Jace stuff was one thing. That the big thing was the map scene explaining we are blockading the eastern coast. That I hope they'll explain this in more small council scene next season, that the Greens have most of the population and wealth, because they have the old royal treasury, they're the party of the coastal cities. They have Lannisport, Old Town, and King's Landing. Whereas the Blacks are flyover country, they're farmers in the Riverlands. They're not these snooty coastal elites like the Hightowers and the Lannisters. So I'm going to make videos about that, of just why did they break the way they did. But yeah, it actually is a plot point later in the war that the Greens have more men, that they can afford to take losses, they have more money, and there reaches a point where Rhaenyra is running low on money. And these are the pragmatic concerns of, even with good generalship, the Blacks have resource shortages eventually. That, well, winter is coming, it's autumn at the beginning of this, and, well, they have the wealth of the Lannisters, and they have all the food from the Reach, and the Riverlands are getting burned out in the war. So what's going to happen when winter comes? The Blacks aren't really prepared for it. Even when they're doing relatively well, that there will be problems with that. But I'm getting too far ahead of myself. But these are things I want to see debated at small council scenes of, well, where are our supplies going to come from? Why are we attacking a certain location for such and such resources? That kind of thing. And this isn't even getting it, like, there's one line about who's going to ride the riderless 6 dragons, that you go, well, we've used up, all of the legitimate Targaryen children have dragons. What about illegitimate Targaryen children and grandchildren of bastards? Anyone who thinks they have a drop of dragon blood in them from a Targaryen ancestor. So they put out an open call for introducing the dragon seeds. Nettles is a major character people really like. They haven't really set her up yet at all. But generally, that's the big. A lot of the list here is me wondering, what do mainstream audiences think? I'm going to be spending the next couple of days looking through reaction videos. Most are generally positive. Okay, they're setting up the map. This is what they're going to do. They'll have to reiterate a lot of this early next season, as they should. Overall, I was happy with this episode in terms of, that's what I would have told them. Use the map table to give exposition. Seed these things for later, but that's just me judging this as an episode. That is concluded now. Looking ahead, we have to start doing season reviews overall. That the overall takeaway from the season assessment of season 1 of this as a whole, and the macro trends. Like I said, any one episode, you couldn't really go, oh, there was a 10-year time skip. That's not episode 6's fault, or even a fault in my mind, but the macro decisions to make Rhaenyra and Alicent friendly, or make time skips, have Daemon be kind of dark, but then nice, then dark again. These are macro scale things, not of one episode. So that's the season overview. And I'm really feeling wobbly and confused now, because I don't know what, I generally like it. I have no real complaints there. I want to see everyone else's season 1 reviews by general channels, other things like Red Team Review, even Westeros.org, a couple of the other major just mainstream news channels like Indie Geek and other stuff. then I will. So not this coming weekend, weekend after. This weekend, everyone's going to make their season reviews. I kind of want to hold off on that until I see what everyone else has to say, because how much can I say other than I really liked it and we needed more episodes. Not in a bad way. I think like episode 8 in Microcosm, I've said, was amazing, but the director on the podcast interview was saying we needed more scenes to tell what I was trying to tell. That Martin said we needed 3 more episodes, and hopefully that'll shift how things are happening with season 2. That when people are going, oh, 3 to 4 seasons, it must be 3, we don't want to stretch it out. That was never a problem for this show. The problem is cramming too much into one season and burning through material without proper setup. So I hope we get 5 seasons or something, but when are we getting the next season? Easily 2024. The question is spring 2024 or even fall of 2024. I'd rather it was fall because I don't want to burn through the material quickly. I don't want this experience to end because when it ends, it ends. Like season 2 will probably be my favorite season, just that phase of the war where it's major armies moving and counter-moving with each other. Like the Clash of Kings type stuff. That is what I would like to. I'm looking forward to seeing with this. A lot of major moments there. So I'm okay with this, and I'm going to be making a channel schedule video right after this on, like I said, because of my new job, I wasn't able to do recaps and analysis videos. I have 7 major analysis videos that I intended to make during Season 1 lined up that I'm going to put out, plus a couple of smaller ones. And by the time I'm done with that, first week of December, December 9th, is going to be that big Game of Thrones convention in Los Angeles. Kit Harington's coming to that. They're probably going to make a lot of casting announcements at that. So that combined with the making of book and the Blu-ray coming out in February. February, we're getting a bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff. March is when filming starts. We still have a lot of aftermath, backlogged analysis videos to make between now and December. So it's not like I'm sitting, other channels will be sitting around going, what do we talk about now? And it's not just a blind reaction. The analysis channels will be having fun still going over. It's an entirely new show. A lot of channels weren't paying attention to this because they considered it a dead franchise. My hope is a trickle of more people will be watching this, binge watching it through Christmas break. I really hope you guys don't leave because we finally put the band back together and managed to revive this franchise, and it's not going to be like the 3-year gap we had, of course, but there's a lot to go over in behind-the-scenes material. I lost track of all the behind-the-scenes interviews by mid-season. There were just too many. I have to read through everything by the writers and directors to get a sense of what's going on behind the scenes and what are all the deleted sequences that they talk about in interviews. So this isn't the end of Season 1, this is the beginning of our hardcore analysis, and there are a lot of exciting things to talk about, because up to this point I've had one hand tied behind my back, doing recaps every week instead of the topic-by-topic things and deep dives I really wanted to report on. Like I wanted to do a cinematography series, I'm going to get that started too, on how they're doing cinematography right that Game of Thrones got wrong. So, a lot of thoughts, I'm really wobbly, I'm sad to see the end of Season 1. Not that I'm sad to see it, I'm just really sad that everyone will go away and the community will go quiet again when, best case scenario, this leads to like a year of heavy discussion. Because I know a lot of people didn't read Fire and Blood who might now want to read Fire and Blood and be watching all of our stuff. I hope we don't, that's what I'm going to end on, I hope we don't go quiet again. I'm really terrified of that, but if nothing else, the casting announcements by December, January will get everyone back, plus filming, so this is catch-up time where we do all of our analysis. I'm sorry I'm wobbly, I'm uncertain about the future now. I've been waiting for this day for 3 years. I've been waiting for a successful first season for 3 years, since Game of Thrones Season 8, that under new people doing it the right way. And it's just a sense of, oh god, what do we do now? But we'll find our footing. It's been a rush. I've seen other channels were struggling to keep the pace of one recap every week. A lot of other channels haven't been able to do analysis stuff. Please stick around. I'm going to do a channel schedule thing. One of my first ones I'm really looking forward to is what happens in the 10-year gap that you could plausibly make a special about, which I'm really excited about. So please like and subscribe. Please subscribe. Stick around. I have a ton of ideas for videos. that there physically isn't enough time to make them all. And if you're interested in that, other news channels who thought this was going to be a failure barely know the material. I know how to make deep dives on this. Please stick around, and go through my backlog. I was one of the few channels closely following filming and casting news for this in early 2021. All the rumors that I will be actively covering just the casting of, oh my god, they cast one of the Dragon Caesar. For me, it's important to know who's playing Jane Arryn, much less Cregan Stark, or Grover Tully, or the Blackwoods. I mean, Black Alley Blackwood will be a major casting, as will Ben Blackwood. So, and Daeron the Daring. So, good times. These are problems we wanted to have. This is not a dead franchise. What is dead may never die, but rises again harder and stronger. We are back. Please give your thoughts on this episode in the comments below. I'll be making a separate video about season overview as a whole. So stick around for that. There is a channel schedule video coming imminently.